morning. Good morning. All right, there we go. Awesome. All right. Thank you, Mario. Most technology things are my fault around here. If we haven't had the pleasure to meet, my name is Keith. I'm the lead pastor here. If you are here for the first time-ish, or you are hearing about life groups and you're like, I've never been in one, I don't know, they sound kind of scary or whatever it might be, can I invite you to mine? We are having a life group for people who have never been in a life group. So that might mean that you're newer to the church, or you've been coming for a while and for whatever reason a life season hasn't worked out, and you might be thinking, I thought you said it wouldn't be scary, and you're very gigantic and scary. My wife isn't, and she's awesome, and she will be co-leading it with me. So I want to encourage you, if you've not been in a life group, please come to ours. This week I had the opportunity to install a new ceiling fan. And, oh, wow. Did I say that out loud? No, I put in a new ceiling fan. I'm relatively handy, and my wife was asking how long this project would take. And, I mean, it can't take that long, right? I mean, it's not like I have to wire something. I'm just taking out an old fixture and putting in one that has a rotating thing on it, he said so handily. But my wife reminded me that when I call something a 10-minute project, what that means in Keith Tower parlance is a 10-minute project means 10 additional trips to Lowe's for all the junk I forgot on my last trip, as opposed to the 5-minute project, which is only 5 extra trips to Lowe's for all the stuff that I forgot. Who knows, when you don't have what you need for what you're trying to do, things are not much fun. Right? If you've ever man, we got company coming over and we're cooking our favorite meal, and you go to grab the spice or the sauce or the key ingredient, it's like, no, it's not there. And now you've got to hustle off to Publix or Aldi or wherever it is that you shop to get that one thing you forgot. It's just such a bummer, isn't it? We're in a series talking about AI. And you know, the beautiful thing about AI is it's not doesn't have to go to Lowe's to get the thing that forgot. It is Lowe's. It is Publix. Instantaneously, artificial intelligence has access to anything it wants to have access to, which is a little bit creepy, but it's also kind of convenient. You know what I mean? Like when you decide, hey, I'm going to put on Spotify and play some music, I got people coming over. AI knows exactly what you want to listen to based on what you've been listening to, tracking all your friends' cell phones as they're arriving and liking what they like, and it just goes and instantaneously pulls every piece of data you could ever want to have just the perfect, convenient song. Isn't that awesome? Or the product you never knew you needed. And I've been convinced, and then I've been talked out of it, and then I get reconvinced and talked out of it, that every device I have is listening to me. Because you say something, and then ta-da, you get an ad for it. And sometimes it's not even you that, I was having a talk with Andrew one time. We're both old, broken down basketball players, and he was talking about one of his old, broken down basketball injuries, which is not one of my old, broken down basketball injuries, but I got an ad for what he was talking about. Now, my guess, I later was told, is that AI just saw our phones so close together and just figured if we're spending that much time together, we must be talking about our old broken down basketball careers, because it tracked all of our injuries all across time and all of our medical records, and somehow knew that we were probably talking about that, and it drops in my phone, so perhaps I can suggest this treatment for him. I think it's listening, but either way, AI has the ability to instantaneously access stuff, and it's convenient, can be. I think it has the potential to be helpful as well. Think of some of the diseases that we've been wrestling to figure out. And you have a scientist over here that's got one piece of the puzzle. You've got a scientist over here maybe with another piece of the puzzle. You got a scientist a long time ago and somebody that's going to come along. What if you could instantaneously just access everything you need, compute it at the speed of, whatever's fast, and just poof out an answer? I think AI poofs things out, poofs you an answer. We actually might be able to solve some incredibly challenging problems that we've had as a society. But there's things that AI, I think, will be able to do for us, but I also saw Mission Impossible 6, which means I know that there are things AI will eventually be able to do to us, right? We've all seen Terminator, hopefully, because it's awesome. But there's something about what happens if this future technology, which is honestly in the infantile stages, it's currently what's called narrow AI, which simply means that it does what we tell it to do. It gathers it all instantly. It doesn't need to pause and go back to lows. It can bring all the information to bear now instantaneously in a moment, but it does what we tell it. There's a time coming where it's going to become general AI. We're not there yet, but where it will start to do things that we don't tell it. And then the dreaded day when it does whatever it wants, right? And it's kind of spooky. We're talking about artificial intelligence, and our series is called Divine Intelligence. By the way, this is a series title that we got from artificial intelligence. It's the only time we ever have and ever will use artificial intelligence for a sermon. We just thought this would be funny. Hey, ChatGPT, what would be a great series about Christianity and artificial intelligence? And it gave us Divine Intelligence, I think, as a shout out to itself. And I almost said, never, no. But God has given us divine intelligence. He's given us timeless wisdom and timeless truth and timeless principles that allow us to deal with any technological advancement that would come our way, up to and including AI and whatever it is that comes after AI in the apocalypse. Right? God has given us in his timeless, inerrant, infallible word truth and principles on how to interact with any technological advancement. And we're working this series out of Ecclesiastes, which was written by a very wise man, probably Solomon. Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verses 9 through 11. And in these simple verses, we're going to see some timeless wisdom from God. Ecclesiastes chapter 1, starting in verse 9, says, "What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. And there's nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing of which it is said, 'See, this is new'? It has already been in the ages before us. There's no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of latter things yet to be among those who come after." This is an amazing opening couple sentences. What has been is what will be. And what has been done is what will be done. There is nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing of which it is said, "See, this is new"? It has already been in the ages before us. How can we say something like artificial intelligence has already been in the ages before us? This technology required so many prior technological advancements that how can we look at a ones and zeros and electricity interacting super fast to pull all the data that's ever existed into one moment and solve a problem? How can we say something like that has existed before? How can we look at something like artificial intelligence and say, yeah, that's nothing new? We can say that because the conditions around humans creating stuff has four principles that have always existed from the beginning of time. People create, people relate, sin pervades, and God has a remnant. It's actually remnant, but I'm a preacher, so I'm trying to make stuff almost rhyme. All right, you got to get close, because pervade doesn't rhyme either, but work with a brother, all right? God leaves in the earth the remnant. People create, people relate. Sin pervades, and God leaves a remnant. From the beginning of time, from the time God wound this thing up and put it into play and added people into his creation, we have been creating. So there's nothing new in that we're inventing something that feels new. The concept of people creating and then relating and then sin pervading and God having a people to prophetically speak into what's happening. That's always existed. In fact, let's go back to the very beginning of this book we call the Bible. Genesis chapter 1, verses 1 through 4. The first 4 sentences say, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. And God said, let there be light. And there was light. And God saw that the light was good. And God separated the light from the darkness. In the very beginning, there wasn't nothing. There was actually chaos. Genesis 2, what it describes this thing called a void and formlessness. It's an old Hebrew word, tohu vavohu, which simply means it was a chaotic mess. And into this chaotic mess, God's Spirit hovers over it, and God speaks and starts to bring order. The word tov brings order to chaos. He starts to pull things together and go, we got this dark, chaotic mess. You know what? Let me add something into it that'll make it less chaotic. Let me bring forth light. And now light comes into the darkness, and then he separates light and darkness. And the rest of Genesis chapter 1 is God basically taking this chaotic mess and bringing organization to it. There's water over the deep, and it's just like a, Category 5 hurricane waves, and he stills that, and then he separates the water from other water by bringing forth land, and then he starts to have the land be able to produce seed and fruit and plants, and then he adds to that animals, and just over and over and over. And you see, Scripture uses this phrase. It says he created it, he looked at it, and it was good. 8 times in Genesis 1 and 2, God orders the chaos and says, man, that's good. That's a lot better than it was. And then he adds humanity into that, and look at what he does as he's creating, and things are getting more complex and more developed and more improved and progressing at an extraordinary rate. God is ordering chaos. And then fast forward a little bit in Genesis chapter 1, verses 25 to 30, God has got all of creation together, and he saw that it was good. Then God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps. Love that part of dominion. So God created man in his own, that was a roach or something other creepy. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created a male and female, he created them. And God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens and over every living thing that moves on the earth. And God said, behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of all the earth, and every tree with its seed and its fruit, and you shall have them for food, and every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heaven, and to everything that creeps on the earth, and everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food. And it was so. So God stepped into the original chaos and started to bring order. And now into order, God adds man made in his image, which means that you and I bear in us just an internal drive to bring order to chaos. You might be saying, have you seen my junk drawer? Well, the fact that you look at it and go, I got to do something about that, is the image of God in humanity. Now, it's not the same level of chaos that God stepped into. He started to order things, but then he goes, look, those fish, man, you can figure out how to catch those. You can fish them. You can farm them. You can do whatever. You mount them on your wall. You do it at those, whatever it is that you want to do. And by the way, all these plants, you can figure out how to now plot land and irrigate and grow them in a different way. You take my image, which is to order chaos, and now bring it to bear into something that is already moving in an orderly fashion. This is what every one of your jobs do. If you're an accountant, you take payroll and slips and paper and numbers and you order them in a way that now helps the business move forward. We had our life group leaders meeting just this past week, and Christy Strasbaugh ordered chaos when she made homemade mac and cheese. She brought disparate pieces, noodles, and cheese, and I'm guessing copious amounts of butter and heat, and then a little bit of crumbly stuff on top. Separately, none of those, But when you put them together, can I tell you, is the image of God in heaven on a plate? Like all of us, whatever it is that you do for work, you are bearing the image of God. You're ordering chaos. People create. And can I tell you, up until this moment in time of where we're going to see in Genesis chapter 3, we create as we relate. We make things better for one another. People create. There's always, when Ecclesiastes says, how is there nothing new under the sun? Because from the very beginning, people have made stuff. It's the image of God being brought to bear. There's always been the advancement of new technology. Part of the created order is people expressing the image of God by bringing order to chaos. We make back in the early days, made simple tools out of new materials. But then in Genesis chapter 3, so we're just still at the very beginning, we start to see the introduction of sin. People fell. People decided they wanted to use this capacity to create and order chaos to their own benefit rather than to the glory of God. And with that, sin entered, and now the option in ordering chaos, now for the first time and forever, will include the use of my image of God for either the betterment of society or for selfish ends. We now see early on in Genesis, I think it's before the flood, we start to see people now digging ore out and adding heat to it and creating metal, the Bronze Age. And with the Bronze Age, you now had the capacity, with the introduction of sin married to the image of God that creates, you now had the capacity to use a new technology for the betterment of people or for selfish gain, to help or to harm. You could make a tool or you could make a weapon. Sin now starts to pervade every choice for the rest of all of the created order, where people can bring their image to bear, people create, and then they relate. Am I going to use this to bless you, or am I going to use this to bless me at the expense of you? Am I going to help you, or will I use this new technology, the ability to create, to harm you? Sin pervades. And the option now exists to, I have chaos, and I bring order to it, and with my new order, I can now use that to create more chaos. People create. People relate. Sin pervades. The issues with artificial intelligence, moral or immoral usage, comes down to sin and the free rein we give to sin, not the free rein we give to AI, the free rein we give to sin. The problem with artificial intelligence is not new technology. The problems with that technology emerge from the sinful use in the human heart of that new technology. New technologies can create new temptations. But most often, they simply just exacerbate the problems that already exist. Sin that isn't dealt with just now has a new vehicle to express itself more efficiently. So now, with artificial intelligence, I can pull anything from anywhere in an instant. Wow! The temptation of what I can do with my sin nature. Because I can access anything and create almost anything at any time. Now with artificial intelligence, we need a reminder that the sinful nature is pervasive. And we need for God's people to shine. The passage in Ecclesiastes goes on and says this in verse 11. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of latter things yet to be among those who come after. What does that mean? It means that we all live in a time where we take things for granted that prior generations would have had their minds boggled to know that they even existed. And by the way, there are future generations yet to come that will experience future things that will have no idea of a time that we lived in where those things didn't yet exist. We see in Genesis, there was a time where language didn't exist. There was a time where metal and tools did not yet exist. There was a time where cities, communities, people brought together and building governments and deciding how to live in social compacts. Those things did not exist at one point back in Genesis. The idea that they could somehow exist would have been like radical and revolutionary. And you and I look and go, of course we have communities. Of course people figure out how to govern themselves. Of course we have tools. Of course we have the ability to just walk into a store and buy clothes and not have to go plant a crop and spin it and make it myself. Of course. But the idea that you could walk in somewhere and just buy it and not have to go slay a bear and skin it and carve it up like that at one point in time, that would have been mind-boggling. And we just forgot those times, and that's okay. We should. The Scripture tells us it's okay. We forget that. But understand, there will be a time where AI feels new to us, where there will be a generation that will grow up, and it'll be as ubiquitous, fancy word, it means everywhere all the time, as having a phone in your pocket. Remember when that was weird? Remember when you only had one attached to your car? Y'all thought I was going to say your wall. Before your car, they were attached to your wall. And before that, you had to have like little clicks and stuff like that, Morse code. And before that, you had to yell, hey, or have smoke signal. Like, you got to be kidding. Just what we've done with technology in the last 150, 200 years is mind-boggling. We cannot imagine not having access in our back pocket to anything at any moment. Yet that's going to be just like, of course, to future generations. And there will be a time that what is new and cutting edge to future generations will be forgot by generations yet to come from them. New generations do not remember the older stuff. And that's okay when it comes to stuff. Future generations do not remember the older technologies, and that's okay when it comes to technology. The problem comes when they forget the 4 timeless principles. People create. People relate. sin pervades. And the church will have a remnant. There's no remembrance of former things, but what if beyond the technology and the stuff, what if there are former things that I have to know to be able to appropriately relate with what is yet to come? For that to happen, it becomes the responsibility of the remnant people of God to inform current people that sin pervades and God has a moral way with which we're to interact with everything coming down the pike. In such a way that future generations don't just remember that there's a morality and a right or wrong, but they can now, in their generation, hold the line and let that emerging generation in their day know that there is a right or wrong. That, listen, people just create. You don't have to freak out about it. We're going to have to relate in a way that God says, and we got to be very mindful of this because sin is pervasive. So we, the people of God, cannot interact with the stuff the same way those do who don't have a God that they follow. There's nothing new under the sun. People create, people relate, sin pervades, God leads a remnant. There's nothing new under the sun. It's just our turn. This technology and the era in which we live is our people of God, remnant of God, is our moment in history. Look what Paul wrote to Timothy. Roughly 1987 years ago, roughly, because there's nothing new. And this was 900 to 1,000 years after Solomon wrote what he wrote, because there's nothing new. Paul wrote to Timothy and said, I hope to come to you soon, in 1 Timothy 3:14 and 15. I hope to come to you soon. But I'm writing these things to you so that, if I delay, you may know how one ought to behave in the household of God, which is the church of the living God, a pillar and a buttress of the truth. The people of God, which that's just what the church is, the people of God always have been, and until Jesus comes back, always will be the gathered pillar and buttress of truth. What's buttress? Because every middle school boy in here is going, he said buttress. It's a bulwark. It's a line in the sand that you will not cross this. It's Monty Python. It's none shall pass. Like, I am holding this line. We uphold truth, which is what a pillar does, a column does. It holds truth up, but it also holds truth vertically. Like, you're not going this way. It's the Notre Dame offensive line. Like, we here, that stops right here. You're not getting through. The church, the people of God, despite people always throughout human history, from the time we were created, we're going to create. We have to figure out how to relate. Well, how do we relate? Because sin pervades. I'll tell you how we relate. The people of God will demonstrate how. Said an excited bunch of people of God. Which means if future generations and current generations will always forget what was developed in past generations and they'll take it for granted, we have a moment whereby we have to hold to truth with our technological advancement so that future generations know how to interact with their technological advancements so they don't forget what we were supposed to tell them. Which means you are currently a prophet in your generation. You are a prophetic voice to generations yet to come, that there is a way that humanity is to relate to technology and to one another in a manner that glorifies God despite sin being pervasive in our culture. You're a prophet. When you proclaim to somebody now, or when you demonstrate in your own interaction with artificial intelligence an appropriate ethic, you are prophesying to future generations that they can't forget what you know to be true, regardless of what technology looks like in the future. Therefore, people of God, we do not get to interact with technology in the same way that others might. Here's what I don't mean. Pastor Keith is saying, get rid of all technology, go back to the Stone Age. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is people will use artificial intelligence in ways that are inappropriate. Can we just agree with that? Has anybody seen technology used in, little bit less than glorious ways? Right. You just don't participate in that. You use technology in ways that are God-honoring. Which means what? You don't get to use technology to be dishonest. Because from the very beginning, there's been a moral code. People create, people relate, and what got people in relational problems from the very beginning was they weren't honest with one another and with God. Just because I can access anything, I can't access anything and put it out there as it was mine. That's dishonest and it's stealing. Those things still exist even if you can access stuff. You don't get to use technology in a manner that's harmful or destructive for another human being. You don't get to do that. Just because you can put somebody else's face on somebody else's body and make them be somewhere that they weren't, you don't get to do that. Because a sinful use of artificial intelligence is taking a tool and making it a weapon, and it is equally as dangerous as somebody from the Bronze Age bludgeoning somebody with a tool. It is equally as mean. It is equally as destructive. The people of God have to say that is a wrong use of technology. And if you love your keyboard and you like to be able to blast people and hurt people with your keyboard, not only are you sinning by being cruel, you're also being sinful by being a coward. Not you. But somebody has to call it what it is. People of God. God's left a remnant where sin is pervasive. We don't get to be mean. We don't get to be hurtful. We don't get to express hate. We don't get to use technology, betterment of self, and the destruction of another human being who's also made in the image of God. You also don't get to use technology to play God. Which means God created a world that you are supposed to be fully present in and interact in. Technology, now artificial intelligence, actually allows you to create your own world. But the people of God don't get to retreat into a world of our own making online. It's immoral. Now, can you play video games? Yes. Can you pop on Snapchat? Sure. But I'm talking about retreating from bringing dominion in this earth, using God's image to create and to proper relate in the world that God made. There's far too many that can just retreat, put on a headset, sit in a chair that moves, put on earphones, and completely disengage from this world to create one that is 100% centered around them and retreat from this world to have a world of their own. Artificial intelligence allows that. And you have a finite number of minutes on this earth. And while moments of escapism into something fun is okay. You don't get to use artificial intelligence to make another world that you can retreat in, that you're the God of. Nor do your kids. They'll forget. If they just see you with goggles over your face, disappeared for hours on end, they won't know that you're not God of your own world. Now, can the goggles be useful for stuff? Absolutely. We were in Israel before the COVID shut down the world, and I was there with a friend, and he had some AI that they were developing in Israel of a tour of the Holy Land, and it was brilliant. It was mind-boggling. I put this thing on, and I was literally in what they know archaeologically about these sites that I was standing on in ruins, and I put the goggles on, and it was fully built and developed. And you could interact with people, but what I'm doing is gaining an appreciation for the world that God made and the God who made that world. And then you take those off, and now you interact in that world in a more God-honoring manner. I use the fact that people create, and people will always relate in a way that now I can do so better than when sin just pervaded my life. And hopefully pass on something to a generation that exists and is yet to come. That is good and true and right. We don't get to lie just because we can. We don't get to cheat, students, just because you can. We don't get to steal just because you can. We don't get to bully just because you can. You don't get to express sexuality outside of marriage just because you can. Those are immoral uses of technology. No different than picking up a Bronze Age tool and using it wrong against another human being. Aiden, can you help me out? In fact, worship team, why don't you come up? Here's the good news. God's truth is timeless. New technologies give ways to express that which has always been true. People create. Awesome. We're creating some crazy stuff. And when we can pull all like the world's thought together and all of history's knowledge into one moment, let me help you out. We're going to be able to create even faster. We're going to be able to create like exponentially fast and exponentially epically. Just make sure in the process that you understand that we also relate. And every way that we relate can have an unintended consequence to another human being. We've got to be real careful because sin is pervasive. It's so easy to use these things just for me. So easy to become self-absorbed when I can get anything immediately available at my fingertips. And when everybody else is using it that way. And even if everybody else uses AI wrong, it's because the best they have access to is artificial intelligence. You, however, have access to divine intelligence. You have a God with a moral code who has given you everything you need in any technological age for human flourishing. He's given it to you in His Son, in His Spirit, in His Word, in His presence, in His people who now know how to appropriate, relate, and not sin toward one another is a gift in the world. You have divine intelligence. Interact with the stuff, it's fine. It's not the mark of the beast. But as you interact with it, please interact with a way that future generations are forgetting, past generations have forgotten stuff. Future generations are going to forget who was going to hold an ethical and moral standard, who's going to be a prophetic voice, who is going to proclaim there's divine intelligence that runs alongside artificial intelligence, if not the people of God in this moment. Aren't you glad we don't live in boring times? You have a great responsibility in the world as a follower of Jesus, walking with other followers of Jesus. You have a great responsibility. I love that. I'm not scared of that. You're not scared of that. It's the way it's always been. It's just our turn. Jesus, we love you. We thank you for your word. We thank you for being a great God. Help us to use that which people have created, expressing your image in the earth, to use it in a way that furthers the expression of your image in the earth, that we may live fully and presently in the world as you created it. You're good. You're great. You'll help us by your Spirit. You'll help us by your word. You'll help us by the relationships we properly build with one another. We're not afraid. It's the hour you've placed us in. Thank you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Let's stand together and just praise our God.